Good morning, students. This year from programming part, you have these many chapters. First, data structure, stacks, queues, and linked lists. Review of C++. Class and objects. Function overloading. Constructors and destructors. Inheritance. Pointers. Data file handling. This is the order what is there in your textbook, but I'll start from class and objects because the programs comes under these chapters are based on class and objects and these concepts. Let us start with the class and objects chapter. Apart from these chapters, there are many more chapters are there. These are programming oriented chapters. So I'll start from class and objects. Now, what is meant by class? I told you, class is a keyword. It is used to create our own data type, isn't it? So the first statement is class is a keyword. You should remember this. It is used to create our own data type. Let us discuss what is the purpose of creating our own data type. Why should we create our own data type? Isn't it? See, let us glance some concepts of what we had learned in the last year. Whenever we want to learn any programming language, we have to know the vocabulary of that language. If you consider a Kannada, English, whatever the language, we have to know the vocabulary and the rules and regulation of that language, how to construct the sentence, and these many things we should keep it in our mind, isn't it? Like that, a programming computer language also having some vocabularies and some syntax, how to construct the instructions, these many things we have to learn. In order to learn these concepts, we implement these in a programs. Very first we learned a small programs, that is sum of two integers, area of circle, area of rectangle, and to check whether given number is a prime or not, and swapping of two integers, isn't it? And sum of n natural numbers. So these are the programs what we discussed in the last year. If you consider sum of two integers, okay, so user has to input two integers and program has to calculate the sum and it display the result. This is the program. To this program, what type of data user has to input? Two integers. So we have to instruct compiler, the given data is integer, you have to identify it as an integer, and that integer has to store in a memory location. From that memory location, it has to come for calculation. Then it display the result. This is the procedure. Then how to reserve memory for these inputs? In programming, how to reserve memory locations? Data type, isn't it? Data type and variable. Data type and variable semicolon. This is the way to create memory location. Now what type of data you are giving? You have to mention its data type. In C++, we have some keywords, some inbuilt data types. Using those data type, we can instruct compiler which type of data we are giving. So what type of memory program has to reserve. For example, if you consider sum of two integer program, two memory locations we required to store these two values. Then how to reserve memory? What type of data you are giving? Integer. So there is a keyword called int. It is inbuilt data type. Int x, y. See, I'm going to reserve two memory locations, and those two memory locations stores two integers. I'm giving the names. These are all called identifiers. So what happens when you write this statement in a RAM? Okay, these are all memory cells. Let us assume some 2-byte memory will be allocated for X, and somewhere some 2-byte memory will be allocated for Y. Okay, these two memory locations are reserved for two integers. This is the way to reserve memory location. I hope you are understanding what I am going to say. See, in order to learn a programming language, we have to know the vocabulary, or in blindly we can tell it as a vocabulary. Vocabulary means what are the basic elements of that language and what are the rules. Those rules are represented as a syntax. How to understand these concepts. Only with the theoretical part we can't understand, so we have to implement these in programs. So that's what we are explaining. I am going to add two integers. Okay, that's why we have to reserve memory locations to store the integers. How to reserve memory? This is the rule in C++, data type, and how many memory locations you are going to reserve. You have to label it. This X, I am going to reserve two memory locations, and one memory location name is X, another memory location name is Y, and these two memory locations takes integer type value. After addition, we'll get a result. That result also integer, so I'll include one more memory. Let us take sum. Just it is a names. These are all called identifiers. So somewhere memory will be allocated. Let us take it as a sum. Okay, this memory name is sum. If you take 2, 3 here, the result will be stored in sum. How? After writing cout statement, cin statement, I hope you know these things. After that, sum is equal to x plus y semicolon, isn't it? Then the result is stored in sum. What you need to observe in this program, the given data is basic type, that is integer type. If you want to calculate area of circle, so what are the requirements? Radius. You have to input radius, isn't it? So radius, it may be integer type or it may be floating type. If you take floating type variable, you can give real numbers. That is also a basic type. So in last year, almost we discussed with the basic type values. Basic type values we have given as an input to the programs. When you come to real-time problems like gaming softwares or some student database, okay, for these kind of programs with the basic data types, we can't give the solution properly. If you consider a student, let us consider the student, okay, here. See, a student, what are the common properties of student? Student number, student name, date of birth, class, isn't it? These are the properties of a student. These are the data. If you consider employee, employee ID, employee name, isn't it? And date of join, designations, and many more properties or many more details are there. If you consider a car in gaming softwares, a car name, company name, or some in real-time solutions. Okay, if your showroom maintains the database about the car name, company name, model, and color, many more features are there. So these are all real-time objects. So I want to store the information or data about these objects. So these object data, we call it as a data members. I hope you are understanding. See, in real time, with the only basic data type, we can't give the solution because here data means if you consider a student, we must store student number, student name, date of birth, and class. These many data items I want to store in a variable. So, but there is no basic data type available in the C++. For example, I want to store name, register number, and date of birth, then class. These different type of data I want to store in a memory location. Okay, I want to store in a memory location. This memory location, let us consider name S1. Okay, but the data type is not mentioned there. It's not there in the C++ library. We have only int, float, float, char, double. These many data types we have in the C++ library. Okay, if you take integer, if I take int s1, s1 can take only integer. If you take float, float s1, s1 take only floating type number. Here s1 has to store these many data. So there is no basic data type. That's why user has to create their own data type, isn't it? In order to create their own data type, we have a keywords in C++. Just before I told, a class is one of the user defined data types. And another one, structure, that we already discussed in the last year. What is the purpose of structure? It is also to create our own data type, isn't it? Before going to create our own data type, one thing we should keep it in our mind. What are the requirements? Based on the requirements, we have to create our own data type. Are you understanding?